You've heard stories of men who cheat, yell, control, or abandon, but there's another story no one tells, a quieter one. The story of men who never hit, never screamed, never stopped loving, yet still got destroyed. Because not all violence leaves bruises. Some of it hides behind tears, behind silence, behind the word love. It's a kind of abuse society doesn't believe in. Female psychological abuse. Men live through it every day, and most will never even know its name. They'll think they're being good husbands, patient partners, strong providers, while being slowly dismantled piece by piece. Until one day, there's nothing left of them, except guilt, confusion, and a haunting question. What happened to me? Today we'll strip away the mask and expose what really happens behind closed doors. How a woman can control a man without ever raising her voice. How she can rewrite his reality, own his emotions, and make him believe the pain is his fault. This isn't a story about hate, it's about power, and how love, when twisted by manipulation, becomes the most effective weapon of all. Section 1. The Trap. Right now as you sit there, someone is being broken not by fists, not by screaming, but by silence, by guilt, by a quiet kind of cruelty that leaves no marks. He thinks he's in love, he thinks he's found the one, but in reality he's walking into a trap that millions of men never see until it's too late. It never starts with abuse, it starts with warmth, with soft laughter, constant attention, and that intoxicating feeling of being finally understood. She listens, she mirrors, she makes him feel like the hero of his own story. She learns what hurts him and what heals him, what makes him feel alive and what makes him feel ashamed, and she stores it all, not to love him better, but to use it later. It sounds dramatic, doesn't it? But ask the man who used to be confident, the man who used to have friends, hobbies, plans, and now spends every day trying to avoid making his wife upset. He won't even realize when it started. He'll just know something feels off. Maybe it's the way she frowns when he laughs too loud on the phone. Maybe it's how she sighs when he says he's meeting his brother. Maybe it's how her silence feels like punishment. At first he tries harder. He wants peace. He wants her to be happy. He wants to fix whatever's wrong. But that's the trap. The more he tries to fix it, the deeper he sinks into her emotional maze. You see, psychological abuse doesn't look like violence. It looks like confusion. It looks like walking on eggshells in your own home. It looks like saying sorry for things you don't even understand. When she cries, he feels guilty. When she's angry, he feels responsible. When she's cold, he blames himself. She's trained him to take responsibility for her emotions, and he doesn't even realize it's happening. In public, everything looks perfect. She smiles, holds his hand, laughs at his jokes. To friends, she's the perfect partner, supportive, devoted, sweet. Behind closed doors, the same woman uses silence like a knife. She withholds affection. She criticizes him under the mask of concern. She makes him feel small in ways that sound harmless to outsiders. And when he finally reacts, when he raises his voice or shuts down, she plays the victim. "Why are you so angry?" she'll say. "You're scaring me." And just like that, she flips the script. Now he's the problem. That's the genius of psychological violence. It's invisible. There are no bruises, no evidence, no witnesses. Just a man slowly losing his identity, while everyone tells him how lucky he is to have her. This isn't about hate, it's about control, about power disguised as love. And it works because it doesn't look like abuse, it looks like devotion. By the time he realizes what's really happening, he's already conditioned. He doesn't argue, he doesn't question, really just obeys. Quietly, apologetically, believing it's his fault she's unhappy. It's not always physical prison walls that trap a man. Sometimes it's the words, the guilt, the tears. Sometimes it's the fear of being seen as the bad guy. Sometimes it's love, twisted into something unrecognizable. She doesn't need to yell to dominate. She just needs to make him believe that peace depends on his compliance. And he'll give up everything, his joy, his pride, his freedom, for a peace that never really comes. Section 2. The Mask. Every manipulative woman wears one thing better than makeup, a mask. A carefully constructed, soft feminine mask that hides a weapon underneath. At first it's irresistible. She's the woman who listens when others talk over you. She laughs at your stories like they matter. She tells you you're different, not like the other guys. You feel chosen, seen, understood. That's how it begins. Not with deception, but with connection. She learns your rhythm, what you like, what you fear, what you crave. She studies you like a scientist studying her subject. The mask she wears isn't fake, it's strategic. The sweetness, the support, the admiration, they're real enough to make you believe, but they're tools designed to disarm you. When you finally lower your guard, she doesn't need to force control. You'll hand it to her willingly, because she's convinced you that she's the only one who truly gets you. That's the brilliance of psychological control. It doesn't need to take, it gets you to give. Let's take a real-world example. A man meets a woman who seems perfect, affectionate, attentive, caring. She praises him constantly in the early days. "You're such a good man. You're the only one I trust." Those words are hooks, and they sink deep. Then slowly the tone shifts. "You're not like you used to be. You've changed. I just miss how loving you were before." Now, every attempt to assert himself feels like betrayal. Every moment he tries to take space becomes proof that he's losing her. She doesn't shout, she doesn't threaten, she withdraws. And for a man who's been fed on her approval, that withdrawal feels like starvation. So he bends, he apologizes, he tries harder. That's how the mask works. She gives affection just long enough to make it addictive, then replaces it with punishment so gentle, so quiet, that he blames himself instead of her. The mask stays on in public too. To friends and family, she's charming, the type of woman who brings cookies to neighbors, remembers birthdays, and always says, "He's such a wonderful husband." So when he starts to fade, when his spark dies and his laughter disappears, no one suspects her. They think he's just distant, or maybe ungrateful. That's how she isolates him without ever forbidding him to see anyone. She controls the narrative. And when she tells people he's been so stressed lately, they believe her because the mask looks real. It feels real. You see, female manipulators understand one thing very well: perception is power. If she controls how others see her, she controls how others see you. She's the angel, you're the flawed one. She's the victim. You're the reason she's sad, and every time you try to explain, you sound defensive. You sound guilty. She doesn't have to prove you wrong. She just has to make you look unstable. And when that happens, you start doubting yourself. You start wondering if maybe she's right, maybe you are the problem. That's when the mask has done its job. She doesn't need to pretend anymore. You've already accepted her version of reality. Behind the mask, there's no empathy, just calculation. She knows when to cry, when to apologize, when to say "I love you." Every move is designed to reset the cycle, to keep you hooked. But the mask always slips, not in public, not with friends, only when you're alone. You'll see flashes of something cold, a smirk that doesn't match the words, a silence that feels like punishment, a look that says, "You belong to me." And that's when the confusion begins, because the woman you fell in love with doesn't exist anymore. You'll try to find her again to bring her back. But she was never real, she was the bait. The mask was never love, it was camouflage. Section 3. The erosion. It doesn't happen overnight. The destruction of a man's confidence is quiet, a slow leak, not an explosion. At first, it's tiny comments. "You always forget things. Why can't you ever do it right? I'm just saying, maybe you're not as good with people as you think." She says it with a smile, maybe even a laugh. It sounds harmless, but over time, those words start carving into him. He begins to hesitate before speaking. He second-guesses his choices. He apologizes before he's even done anything wrong. And that's exactly what she wants. Doubt is the foundation of control. Once he starts doubting himself, she doesn't need to shout or argue. He'll silence himself. One man told me his wife used to correct everything he said. At first it was small things, the date of an event, the name of a friend. Then it was opinions. "That's not true. You're exaggerating. You always make things sound worse." After years of this, he stopped talking altogether. She didn't need to demand silence. She made him afraid to speak. That's psychological violence, not in-your-face aggression, but a steady, invisible drip of doubt that empties a man from the inside out. She becomes his mirror, reflecting only his flaws. If he works late, he's neglectful. If he comes home early, he's lazy. If he saves money, he's stingy. If he spends it, he's irresponsible. No matter what he does, he's wrong. Eventually, he starts believing it. He stops seeing himself as competent, as desirable, as worthy. He becomes dependent, not because he wants to, but because she's convinced him he can't survive without her approval. And when he tries to reclaim his old self, the confident man he once was, she mocks it. "Oh, now you think you're better than me? Who put that idea in your head? You're not the man you think you are." It's not a fight, it's erosion. Every word, every look, every sigh wears him down, until one day he doesn't recognize the reflection in the mirror. The fire's gone, the laughter's gone. All that's left is confusion and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she'll love him again if he tries hard enough. That's how powerful this kind of control is. It doesn't break men by force, it convinces them to break themselves. Section 4. The control. By the time he realizes something's wrong, it's already too late. She doesn't scream, doesn't hit, doesn't need to. Control, for her, is an art form, and she's mastered every brushstroke. She knows when to pull away and when to come close, when to cry and when to go silent. when to make him feel like a hero, and when to remind him he's nothing without her. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. Every mood swing, every tear, every cold shoulder serves a purpose, to keep him off balance, to keep him chasing her approval, to keep him believing that if he just tries harder, she'll love him again. And that's how she wins, because once a man starts trying to earn peace instead of expecting respect, he's already surrendered. Her weapons aren't visible, they're emotional. Guilt, withdrawal, comparison, silence. Each one subtle enough to deny, sharp enough to destroy. She'll bring up other men, not directly, but just enough. Mark's wife said he still opens the door for her. Sarah's husband planned a surprise trip so romantic. He hears the message, "You're not enough." So he works harder, bends more, gives more, and she rewards him for a while, until the next round begins. That's what people don't understand about psychological control. It's not constant abuse, it's a cycle. Warmth then cold, praise then punishment, push, pull, repeat. The confusion is part of the conditioning. She makes him responsible for her happiness. If she's sad, it's because he failed her. If she's angry, it's because he triggered her. If she's distant, it's because he didn't try hard enough. He becomes her emotional caretaker, walking on eggshells every day. You'd think a man would leave after a while, but he doesn't, because he's addicted, not to her pain, but to her approval. Those rare moments when she's kind feel like oxygen after drowning, and that's how she keeps him gasping, apologizing, hoping. She doesn't need locks or threats, she has his mind. And once she controls how he feels, she controls everything. He'll stop seeing friends because she feels left out. He'll spend his money the way she wants because she says it's for us. He'll adjust his tone, his behavior, his dreams just to avoid another cold stare. And when he finally breaks down, when he admits he's miserable, she'll say, "You're being dramatic, you're lucky I put up with you." That's not love, that's psychological imprisonment dressed as devotion. And the scariest part, he'll defend her if anyone questions it. Because by now she's trained him to protect the very person who's destroying him. Section 5. The illusion. Reality doesn't disappear all at once. It fades, little by little, until he can't tell what's true anymore. That's how she wins, not by force, but by rewriting his perception of reality. Gaslighting isn't shouting "you're crazy," it's quieter than that. It's when she denies what just happened, twists conversations, rewrites history. She'll say, "I never said that," even when he knows she did. Or, "You're imagining things," when he's sure he isn't. After a while, he starts wondering if his memory really is that bad. That's when she's in full control. Because when a man no longer trusts his own mind, he'll trust hers instead. She'll rewrite entire arguments to make herself the victim. He'll recall her yelling, but she'll insist she was calm and reasonable. She'll swear he raised his voice, he started it, he made her cry. And when he tries to defend himself, she'll twist that too. "See, you're doing it again, you always overreact." Now he's not arguing the issue anymore, he's defending his sanity. She's brilliant at using emotion as evidence. If she's crying, then she must be right. If he's angry, he must be guilty. Logic doesn't matter, facts don't matter, only how things feel, and she controls the feelings. Even the good days become weapons. When she suddenly acts loving again, he feels relieved. He starts believing things are finally improving. But that's part of the illusion. She's not healing the relationship, she's resetting it, giving him just enough hope to stay, just enough comfort to doubt his instincts. Every abuser knows this. Confusion is stronger than fear. A terrified man might run, but a confused man stays. He starts apologizing for things he never did. He accepts stories that make him look like the villain because he's too exhausted to keep fighting. If he brings up the pain, she'll accuse him of being obsessed with the past. If he lets it go, she'll pretend it never happened. Either way, she wins. He becomes dependent on her version of events. When friends ask how things are going, he says we're working on it. When they ask what's wrong, he can't explain, because he doesn't know anymore. She's rewritten his memories, his feelings, his identity. He's no longer the confident man who once questioned things. Now he's the man who second-guesses everything. She's erased his truth and replaced it with hers. And the world believes her, because she's calm, composed, reasonable. He's the one who looks anxious, agitated, unstable. The perfect setup. That's the illusion of psychological abuse. She doesn't need to destroy his world, she just needs to make him doubt it ever existed. Section 6. The collapse. Every man has a breaking point. It doesn't come with a crash, it comes with silence. A moment when something inside him just shuts off. He's not angry anymore, he's not trying to fix it, not trying to prove himself, not even trying to be understood. He's just tired, bone deep, soul level tired. That's what psychological abuse does. It doesn't just hurt you, it empties you. piece by piece it takes your energy, your focus, your joy, until there's nothing left to give. At first he tells himself it's just stress. Work's been rough. He's not sleeping enough. He'll be fine. But it's not stress, it's despair. He starts living on autopilot. Wake up, work, come home, walk on eggshells, sleep alone, repeat. He stops laughing, stops talking, stops fighting. To outsiders, he looks calm, maybe even content. But inside, he's fading. When you live under constant emotional pressure, your mind adapts by going numb. It's a survival mechanism, not healing. And that's when she senses it. The distance, the emptiness. So she shifts the game again. Now she's suddenly sweet, concerned. What's wrong, baby? You've been so distant lately. The same woman who drained him dry is now pretending to nurse him back to life. It's not compassion, it's maintenance. She's making sure her favourite puppet doesn't break completely. He tries to respond. He wants to believe her warmth is real again. But deep down, something feels off. Her words don't match her eyes anymore. He knows this routine, the temporary tenderness before the next storm, and for the first time, it doesn't work. That's the beginning of the collapse, not when he explodes, but when he stops believing her. When the illusion cracks even slightly, everything starts to unravel. He begins to see patterns he ignored, the same manipulations, the same guilt trips, the same "you're the problem" conversations on repeat. It's like watching a movie he's seen too many times, and finally realizing he's the one being played. But escape isn't easy. She can sense when control is slipping, so she escalates. Tears, threats, accusations. "I knew you'd leave me. You're just like everyone else." And there it is, the final hook, guilt. If he stays, he loses himself. If he leaves, he's the monster who abandoned her. That's the choice every abused man faces, freedom or reputation, peace or shame. The collapse isn't just emotional, it's physical. He stops eating right, sleeping right, thinking straight. His body carries the weight of years spent being unseen, unheard, unloved, and the world still tells him he's lucky to have her. That's the cruelest part. No one sees his pain until it's too late, until the light in his eyes is gone for good. Section 7. The escape. Leaving isn't a decision, it's a rebirth. No one just walks out of psychological abuse. You crawl out, you bleed out, you rebuild from the bones up. He doesn't leave one day because he's suddenly strong. He leaves because he's finally empty. There's nothing left for her to take. No more explanations, no more begging, no more trying to make her understand. He realizes she never wanted understanding, she wanted control. That's when something shifts inside him. The same man who once apologized for everything now starts going quiet for a different reason. Not out of fear, but out of realization. He's done explaining pain to the person who caused it. The escape always starts in silence. No fights, no dramatic exits, just distance. He starts spending more time alone, even if it's just sitting in his car with the engine off, staring at nothing. Because for the first time, that silence feels peaceful, not punishing. But make no mistake, she feels it. She senses the energy change the moment he starts seeing through her, and she panics. Suddenly she's the perfect partner again. She apologizes, cries, says she's working on herself. She promises counseling, promises to change, promises that this time will be different. But it's not remorse, it's strategy. She's trying to reset the cycle before he finds the strength to walk away for good. That's when he faces the hardest truth of all. She doesn't love him. She loves controlling him. Once he sees that, the illusion dies for good, and what's left isn't anger, it's grief. He mourns the woman he thought she was. He mourns the years he lost trying to fix something that was never broken, except him. He mourns the version of himself that believed love was supposed to hurt. But here's what no one tells you about escaping this kind of abuse. Freedom feels like guilt at first. He'll feel guilty for leaving her, guilty for giving up, guilty for putting himself first, because she trained him to feel responsible for her pain. It takes time to unlearn that. The first few months are the hardest. The loneliness is real. The silence feels strange. He'll wake up expecting to be criticized. He'll apologize out of habit. He'll question if maybe she was right all along. That's how deep the programming goes. But slowly something changes. He starts to laugh again. A real laugh, not the polite one he used to fake. He reconnects with old friends. He remembers what it feels like to breathe without tension, to sleep without fear. He realizes that peace doesn't need to be earned. It was his all along. And that's when healing begins. Because escaping her control isn't just about leaving the relationship. It's about leaving behind the version of himself she created. The timid, doubtful, quiet man who lived for her approval. He has to bury him to bring back the man he truly is. It's not easy, it's not quick, but it's worth everything. And for every man reading this, wondering if it's really abuse, wondering if he's overreacting, ask yourself one question. Do you feel safe being yourself around her? If the answer is no, you already know the truth. Love doesn't drain you. Love doesn't silence you. Love doesn't make you feel small. Real love gives you back to yourself. And if you have to lose everything to find that again, it's not the end of your story, it's the beginning of your freedom. Final words. If you're living this, you already know the truth. You can't fix someone who enjoys your pain. You can't save someone who feeds on your guilt, but you can save yourself. And that's where freedom begins. This isn't about hating women. It's about exposing the quiet kind of cruelty that hides inside love and helping men see that survival isn't weakness, it's clarity.